The kingdom of Wisteria flourished under the reign of King Ethan and Queen Lily, but not all challenges had been overcome. In the first weeks after the coronation, Lily discovered that ruling alongside her beloved required more than love and compassion. The nobles of the court observed every movement of the new queen with critical eyes, whispering through the corridors about the humble origins of the woman who now occupied the throne. One morning, while dew still covered the palace gardens, Lily walked alone through the corridors when she heard voices coming from the council chamber. It was Duke Maxwell, distant cousin of the late King George, talking with other nobles. "The Queen of Eastwood," they said with disdain, "a slave who seduced our prince. The kingdom is doomed under the command of a woman without lineage." Lily felt her chest tighten, but instead of retreating, she raised her head and entered the room. Silence fell like a heavy curtain. "Gentlemen," she said firmly, though her heart was racing, "I understand your concerns. I wasn't born with the silver spoon, that's true, but I know hunger, fear, and the desperation of the people. Perhaps that's exactly what this kingdom needs, someone who truly understands the suffering of its subjects." Duke Maxwell stood up, his face red with indignation. "Your Majesty," he said with obvious sarcasm in his voice, "what could a woman from Eastwood teach the nobles of Wisteria about governance?" Lily approached him, her eyes meeting his without hesitation. "I can teach you about resilience, Duke, about rebuilding when everything seems lost. I saw my homeland destroyed, my family die before my eyes. And yet here I stand, ready to serve this kingdom with every fiber of my being." At that moment, the doors opened and Ethan entered, having heard part of the conversation. His imposing presence made all the nobles bow. "My queen is right," he proclaimed. "Lily Valentine is not only my wife by love, but my choice as sovereign for her wisdom. She knows the needs of the people in a way that we, raised in palaces, will never know." The days that followed were marked by growing tension. Sophia, the rejected princess, had departed for the neighboring kingdom of Monterey, swearing revenge. Letters arrived weekly with veiled threats, insinuations of alliances being formed against Wisteria. Lily read each one with growing concern, but Ethan always reassured her with soft kisses and promises of protection. It was then that something unexpected happened. The old lady whom Lily called mother fell gravely ill. The best doctors in the kingdom were summoned, but all shook their heads with regret. The fever consuming her was mysterious, resistant to all known treatments. Lily spent entire nights by her bedside, holding her wrinkled hand and singing the songs of Eastwood that her true mother used to sing. "My dear daughter," whispered the lady on a particularly difficult night, her voice weak as wind through dry leaves, "I have a secret to share with you." Lily leaned closer, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I knew your real mother," continued the old woman. "She came to the palace years before you were born, seeking work. She was a beautiful and brave woman just like you." Lily's heart raced. "You knew my mother? What was she like? What happened to her?" The old lady coughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the room. "Her name was Elena Valentine. She worked here for a few months before leaving. She was pregnant, but never said who the father was. She only asked that if ever a child with the Valentine surname came to the palace, I should protect them." The revelation hit Lily like lightning. Everything began to make sense. The destiny that had brought her here, the meeting with Ethan, the inexplicable protection from this woman. But before she could ask more questions, the lady's breathing became more labored. Lily cried for help, and Ethan came running, followed by doctors. The night was long and distressing. The entire kingdom seemed to hold its breath as they fought to save the life of the one considered the queen's mother. Ethan held Lily as she cried, whispering words of comfort in her ear. At dawn, a miracle happened. The fever broke, and the lady opened her eyes, weak but alive. Recovery was slow, but Lily never left her side. During these days, more secrets were revealed. The old lady told of a chest hidden in the palace catacombs, left by Elena Valentine before she departed. With Ethan's permission, Lily descended into the dark depths of the palace, guided only by the flickering light of a torch. The catacombs were a labyrinth of damp, cold corridors. The air smelled of mold and forgotten history. Each step echoed like a distant drum, and Lily felt as if the ghosts of the past were watching her. Finally, following the lady's precise instructions, she found a small alcove hidden behind an ancient statue. The chest was there, covered by decades of dust and cobwebs. With trembling hands, Lily opened the rusty latch. Inside, she found yellowed letters, a silver medallion, and a leather-bound diary. The medallion contained a miniature portrait of a woman who was her perfect image, only with clothes from another era. It was Elena, her mother. Lily spent hours reading the diary by candlelight in her chambers. The pages revealed a story of forbidden love between Elena and a noble of Wisteria, whose name had been carefully crossed out in all mentions. Elena wrote about her dreams for the baby she carried, about the fear of being discovered, about the painful decision to leave to protect her child. The last entry was dated just days before Lily's birth. "My dear child," Elena had written, "I leave you this legacy not of gold or silver, but of truth. You are a child of love, no matter what the world might say. Be strong, be brave, and never allow anyone to diminish your worth. The blood that runs in your veins is noble, but it is your heart that will determine your true value." Ethan found Lily crying over the diary's pages. Without saying anything, he wrapped her in his arms, letting her shed all the tears she had held back. When she finally managed to speak, she told him everything. Ethan listened in silence, his face passing through various emotions. "Does this change anything between us?" asked Lily, her voice small and fearful. Ethan held her face between his hands, looking deeply into her eyes. "It does," he said, and Lily's heart almost stopped. "Now I love you even more, knowing that you overcame not only the tragedy of Eastwood, but also the mystery of your origins. You are even stronger than I imagined." That night, as the full moon bathed the palace in its silver light, Ethan and Lily renewed their vows of love in the Queen's private garden. The white roses that Ethan had ordered, planted especially for her, exhaled a sweet perfume in the night air. Each shared kiss was a promise, each embrace a fortress against the storms that would surely come. But fate had other plans. The next morning, messengers arrived with alarming news. Sophia had convinced the King of Monterey to form an alliance against Wisteria. Worse still, she claimed to have proof that Ethan and Lily's marriage was illegitimate, based on ancient laws that prohibited union between nobles and slaves. The royal council was urgently convened. The tension in the room was palpable, like electricity before a storm. Duke Maxwell, who had been critical from the beginning, now seemed genuinely concerned. "Your Majesties," he said, "we must act wisely. A war with Monterey would be devastating for both kingdoms." Lily rose, her posture regal despite the internal turmoil. "Gentlemen of the council," she began, "I will not allow more blood to be shed because of me. If my abdication will bring peace to the kingdom, I will do it willingly." Ethan immediately protested, but Lily continued, "However, before any decision, I propose we send a delegation to Monterey. Let me go personally to speak with Sophia." The room exploded in protests. It was unthinkable for the Queen to put herself in such danger. But Lily remained firm, and something in her determination convinced even the most skeptical. Ethan, realizing he could not dissuade her, insisted on accompanying her, along with his most trusted personal guard. The journey to Monterey took 3 days across dusty roads and dense forests. At each stop, Lily observed the people, saw in their faces the same mixture of hope and fear she had known in Eastwood. In a small village on the border, a little girl approached her with a wildflower. "For the beautiful Queen," said the child with a toothless smile. Lily knelt and hugged the girl, promising herself she would do everything to prevent that child from experiencing the horrors of war. Monterey Palace rose like a mountain of black stone against the stormy sky. Sophia awaited them in the throne room, dressed in a blood-red gown that accentuated her cold beauty. At her side, the old King of Monterey observed with calculating eyes. "So the slave from Eastwood dares to step into my kingdom," said Sophia, her voice distilling venom. Lily didn't falter. "I come as Queen of Wisteria," she responded calmly, "and as someone who knows the weight of loss and the value of peace. Sophia, I know I caused you pain, and for that I ask forgiveness. But I will not allow your suffering to cause the suffering of thousands of innocents." Sophia laughed, a cutting sound like breaking glass. "You stole everything from me. Ethan was mine by right. Our marriage had been arranged since childhood." "And I don't believe that love can be arranged or stolen," Lily replied. "Love chooses its own paths. Ethan chose me as I chose him. But that doesn't diminish your worth, Sophia. You are beautiful, intelligent, and strong. Surely you will find someone who truly loves you. The king of Monterey, who had remained silent, finally spoke. Your words are beautiful, Queen Lily, but words do not change ancient laws. If you can prove you were not a slave when you married Ethan, I will consider withdrawing my support for Sophia's claims. Lily felt the weight of the moment. Then, in a clear voice, she began to tell about her mother's diary, about the noble blood that ran in her veins, albeit born of forbidden love. But more than that, she spoke about how Ethan had freed all slaves in Wisteria in his first decree as king, technically freeing her before their marriage was even officialized. The silence that followed was dense. Sophia seemed to have been struck by lightning. The king of Monterey scratched his graying beard thoughtfully. Then something unexpected happened. A young noble of the Monterey court stepped forward. Your Majesty, he said, addressing his king, if I may, I would like to speak in defense of Queen Lily. All turned in surprise. The young man, introduced as Prince Marcus, the king's youngest son, continued. I was in Wisteria during the coronation, disguised among the people to observe. I saw how Queen Lily is loved by her subjects. I saw how she stopped her royal carriage to help an injured child, how she distributed coins from her own pocket to the poor. If we question her legitimacy by her birth, we should question the legitimacy of all of us who were born in golden cradles but have never truly known our people. Marcus's words caused a murmur in the court. Sophia looked betrayed, her eyes blazing with anger. But the old king raised his hand for silence. My son speaks with wisdom that shames me for not having seen earlier. Queen Lily, I accept your explanation. There will be no war between our kingdoms. The relief Lily felt was so intense her legs almost gave way. Ethan held her discreetly, his touch conveying strength and love. But Sophia was not ready to give up. If there will be no war, she said bitterly, then I demand a duel. By the ancient laws, I have the right to challenge the one who took my place. The hall fell into deadly silence. A duel between nobles was rare, between women even more so. Lily felt Ethan tense beside her, ready to intervene, but she gently touched his arm. I accept, said Lily, surprising everyone, but with one condition. If I win, you will abandon all claim to Ethan and find peace. If you win, I will withdraw to a convent and annul my marriage. Ethan protested vehemently, but Lily was resolute. The duel was set for dawn the following day. The night that preceded was one of the longest in Lily's life. Ethan remained by her side, holding her as if he could protect her with his love alone. You don't need to do this, he whispered repeatedly. I know, responded Lily, but I need to. Not just for us, but for Sophia too. She needs this closure to move forward. When the first rays of sun touched the palace courtyard, the two women met. Sophia had chosen swords, a weapon in which she had been trained since childhood. Lily had never held a sword before meeting Ethan, but in the months as queen, she had insisted on learning to defend herself. The old lady, in her wisdom, had secretly arranged for Lily to receive lessons from the kingdom's best swordsman. The duel began with Sophia attacking ferociously, her anger fueling each blow. Lily defended herself with difficulty, her movements less refined but full of determination. The sound of metal against metal echoed through the courtyard as nobles from both kingdoms watched with bated breath. Sophia was clearly technically superior, but Lily had something she didn't, the experience of fighting for survival. Each time she was cornered, Lily found an unexpected way out, using unorthodox movements she had learned on the streets of Eastwood when she needed to defend herself from thieves and soldiers. The turning point came when Sophia, in her fury, left an opening in her defense. Lily could have taken advantage to disarm her, perhaps even hurt her, but instead, she deliberately lowered her sword. Sophia, what do you really want? Asked Lily, breathless. Is it Ethan you love, or the idea of what he represents? Sophia hesitated, her sword trembling. Tears began to run down her perfect face. I don't even know anymore, she admitted, her voice breaking. I've spent so much time hating you that I forgot what it's like to not feel this weight. Lily took a regretful step, still on guard but no longer in attack position. Then free yourself from this weight. Hatred is a prison we built for ourselves. For a long moment, the two women stared at each other. Then Sophia let her sword fall with a metallic clang. I give up, she said simply. Perhaps you're right. Perhaps I need to learn to truly love, not just possess. Lily carefully approached and, to everyone's surprise, embraced Sophia. The princess initially stiffened, but then returned the embrace. crying years of frustration and pain. Prince Marcus, who had observed everything with intensity, approached when the two women separated. "Lady Sophia," he said gently, "if you'll allow me, I would be honored to show you the gardens of Monterey. They say the roses bloom there even in winter." Sophia looked at him, really looked, perhaps for the first time. There was kindness in his eyes, something she hadn't noticed before, blind as she had been by her obsession. The return to Wisteria was triumphant. The people, who had feared war, received their sovereigns with celebrations. The streets were decorated with flowers, children sang songs of peace, and church bells rang cheerfully. Lily, from atop her carriage beside Ethan, finally felt complete. But life had even more surprises in store. A few weeks after their return, Lily began to feel morning sickness. The royal physician, after examining her, delivered the news with a radiant smile. The queen was expecting an heir. Ethan, upon learning the news, lifted Lily in his arms and spun her in the air, laughing like a child. The entire kingdom celebrated the news. The old lady, now completely recovered and installed in quarters worthy of a queen's mother, cried with joy. "Your mother would be so proud," she said to Lily. "This baby will carry the best of two worlds, the nobility of Wisteria and the strength of Eastwood." The months of pregnancy were ones of preparation and hope. Ethan became even more protective, if that was possible. He sent for the best midwives in the kingdom, created a special garden where Lily could walk safely, and spent hours talking to the baby still in the womb, telling stories of love and courage. Lorenzo, the former chancellor, was found months later living as a beggar in the streets of a distant kingdom. When news reached Lily, she surprised everyone by sending for him, not to punish him further, but to offer him a chance at redemption. Honest work in the royal fields, far from the palace, but with dignity. Lorenzo, broken and humiliated by life, accepted with tears of gratitude. It was on a full moon night, similar to the one when Ethan and Lily had renewed their vows, that the labor pains began. The palace entered into frantic activity. Ethan, contrary to all tradition, insisted on staying by Lily's side throughout the entire process. He held her hand as she screamed, whispered words of love as she struggled to bring their child into the world. When finally the baby's cry echoed through the corridors, the entire kingdom seemed to sigh with relief. It was a boy, healthy and strong, with Ethan's blue eyes and Lily's dark hair. They named him Alexander Valentine, uniting the two worlds in his very name. The presentation of the crown prince was a grand event. Delegations from all neighboring kingdoms came to pay homage. Sophia came personally, now engaged to Prince Marcus, her face transformed by genuine happiness. She brought a special gift, a small carved wooden horse that had belonged to Ethan as a child, something she had kept all these years. It was a gesture of true peace, of a closed circle. The baptism of little Alexander was celebrated with the opening of the palace gates to the people. Lily insisted that everyone, nobles and commoners, rich and poor, should be able to see and bless the future king. The line extended for miles, each person bringing a small gift or simply words of blessing. Among the crowd, Lily noticed a group of refugees from Eastwood. Their faces marked by suffering lit up when she recognized them and addressed them personally. She spoke to them in their native dialect, promised they would be welcome in Wisteria, that they would receive land to cultivate and an opportunity to rebuild their lives. The story of Lily spread beyond the borders of Wisteria. Troubadours sang about the slave who became queen, about love that overcame prejudice, about wisdom born from suffering. But for Lily, the most important thing wasn't the songs or legends. It was the quiet morning moment when Alexander slept in her arms, Ethan by her side, the old lady embroidering near the window. One day, while walking through the gardens with her son, now a curious 3-year-old boy, Lily found a young escaped slave hiding among the rose bushes. The girl trembled with fear, expecting punishment. Lily knelt before her, remembering her own desperation years ago. "What is your name, child?" she asked gently. "Maria, your majesty," replied the girl with a trembling voice. "Please don't send me back." Lily looked into the girl's eyes and saw her own past reflected there. She stood up and extended her hand. "Come, Maria. In Wisteria, there are no more slaves. Only people looking for their place in the sun." The girl took her hand hesitantly and Lily led her to the palace, where she would be educated and cared for like all other children under royal protection. Ethan, watching from the window of his office, smiled. His queen had not only brought love to his life, but had transformed the kingdom itself. Under their joint reign, Wisteria had become a beacon of hope, a place where birth did not determine destiny, where true love was valued above political alliances. But fate still held trials. A terrible plague began to spread through neighboring kingdoms. The people panicked, memories of the epidemic that had killed King George still fresh. Lily and Ethan worked tirelessly, organizing quarantines, distributing medicines, personally caring for the sick despite the protests of their advisors. It was during this crisis that Lily discovered an unexpected talent. The medicinal herbs her true mother had taught her to recognize in Eastwood, combined with the knowledge of royal physicians, created effective treatments. The queen spent days in the improvised laboratory, her hands stained green from plants, her face marked by fatigue but illuminated by determination. Little Alexander, demonstrating courage beyond his years, insisted on helping. He carried bandages, brought water to the sick, his small face serious as he imitated his mother's careful gestures. Ethan saw in him Lily's compassion and felt his chest expand with pride. The crisis passed, leaving Wisteria stronger and more united. The people, who already loved their queen, now revered her as a savior. But Lily refused to accept all the credit. In every speech, she mentioned the courage of the doctors, the dedication of volunteers, the strength of the people. This genuine humility only increased the love they felt for her. Years passed. Alexander grew strong and just, educated in both the arts of war and peace. Lily had 2 more children, the twins Elena and Valentine, named in honor of her mother and her roots. The palace echoed with children's laughter, something that had never happened in the austere times of King George. The old lady, now truly elderly, spent her days telling the royal children stories about ancient times, about their mother's courage, about how true love always finds a way. Her words were engraved in young hearts, seeds of wisdom for the future. On a special afternoon, the kingdom celebrated the 10th anniversary of Ethan and Lily's coronation. Preparations had taken months, with delegations from all corners of the known world coming to pay tribute. Among the guests, a surprise, the King of Zephyra, the same kingdom that had destroyed Eastwood, came personally to ask forgiveness. He was a new man, son of the one who had ordered the invasions. He knelt before Lily in the great hall before hundreds of witnesses. "Queen Lily," he said with a choked voice, "I come seeking forgiveness for the harm my father caused your people. I bring offers of reparation, but I know nothing can return what was lost." The hall fell silent, all eyes on Lily. She descended from her throne, each step echoing in the silence. When she reached the kneeling king, she extended her hand to help him rise. "Forgiveness," she said, her voice clear as crystal, "does not erase the past, but it can build a better future. Rise, King of Zephyra, and let us be allies in peace as our fathers were enemies in war." The moment was so powerful that many in the audience cried. Ethan watched his queen with renewed admiration. Even after all these years, she still surprised him with her ability to transform pain into hope. The alliance with Zephyra brought unexpected prosperity. Trade routes were opened, knowledge was shared, and many Eastwood refugees were finally able to visit their native lands, now being rebuilt with help from both kingdoms. Lily established a special school in the palace, where children of all backgrounds could learn together. Nobles and commoners, rich and poor, all seated on the same benches, learning that knowledge knows no class boundaries. Alexander studied there too, learning to see his future subjects as equals and friends. It was during one of these lessons that an incident changed everything. A noble boy mocked a poor girl for her patched clothes. Alexander, then 12 years old, immediately stood up. "If you judge someone by the clothes they wear," he said with authority beyond his years, "then you are not worthy of the clothes you yourself wear. My mother taught me that true value lies in the heart, not in fabric." The story spread quickly, confirming what many already knew. The future king would be worthy of his parents. Lily, upon hearing about the incident, embraced her son with tears in her eyes. "You are becoming the man I always knew you would be," she whispered. But not all victories were easy. A group of conservative nobles, secretly led by Duke Maxwell, who had never truly accepted Lily, began to conspire. They wanted Alexander to be educated away from his mother's influence in a traditional military academy where he would learn the old ways. The conspiracy was discovered by Maria, that young girl Lily had saved years ago and who now served as a lady-in-waiting to the twin princesses. She heard whispered conversations and immediately alerted her savior. Lily could have punished the conspirators severely, but she chose another path. She summoned all the nobles involved to a private dinner. When they were all gathered, expecting some trap, Lily served them food personally. The gesture was so unexpected they were stunned silent. "Gentlemen," she said as she served, "I know of your plans. I understand your fears. You think I am weakening the future king with my common influence." Duke Maxwell, red with shame and anger, tried to protest, but Lily continued, "Therefore, I invite you to spend a week in the poorest villages of the kingdom. See with your own eyes what Alexander sees. Meet the people he will one day govern. Then come back and tell me if you still believe that distance and ignorance make a good king." Reluctantly, the nobles accepted the challenge. What they saw changed many of them. The dignified poverty, the daily struggle, the persistent hope despite difficulties. When they returned, several asked for forgiveness. Duke Maxwell, too proud to fully admit his error, at least ceased his active opposition. Time continued its inexorable march. The twins grew beautiful and intelligent, Elena with her father's warrior spirit, and Valentine with her mother's deep compassion. The old lady, after a long and full life, passed away peacefully in her sleep on a spring night. Her funeral was a state event, honoring her as the true mother of the queen she had been. Lily cried as she hadn't since the loss of her family in Eastwood, but this time she had Ethan and her children to console her. Alexander, now a young man of 16, gave a moving speech about the heart grandmother who had taught them all the true meaning of family. "She showed us that blood may create bonds, but it is love that makes them unbreakable," he said, his strong voice echoing through the cathedral. It was during this time that disturbing news arrived from the north. A new power was emerging, a warlord who called himself the conqueror of 1,000 kingdoms. His forces had subdued 3 kingdoms in less than a year, and his eyes were now turning south, toward the prosperous lands of Wisteria and its allies. Ethan convened a war council, but it was Lily who proposed the boldest strategy. Instead of waiting for the attack, why not try diplomacy first? "Send me as an emissary. I've transformed enemies into allies before." The council was horrified by the suggestion. It was too dangerous, too reckless. But Alexander surprised everyone by supporting his mother. "If anyone can find peace where others see only war, it's my mother. But she won't go alone. I will accompany her." Ethan initially refused outright. But seeing the determination in the eyes of his wife and son, and remembering how Lily's courage had saved the kingdom before, he reluctantly agreed. The journey north was arduous. The roads became wilder each day, the villages more sparse and frightened. Refugees fleeing south told terrible stories about the conqueror, about his cruelty, about how he transformed kings into servants and queens into slaves. When they finally arrived at the conqueror's camp, Lily felt a shiver down her spine. It was a sea of black tents with banners fluttering like ravens in the wind. Brutal guards escorted them to the main tent where the warlord awaited them. The conqueror was an enormous man, scars crossing his face like maps of violence. But when his eyes met Lily's, something changed in his expression. For a moment, just a moment, she saw not a monster, but a man broken by life. "So the Queen of Wisteria comes to me," he said, his voice like distant thunder. "They say you were a slave before becoming queen. Is that true?" Lily stood straight. "It's true. I knew chains before I knew the crown. That's why I know that true strength isn't in subjugating others, but in freeing oneself from internal chains." The conqueror laughed, but it wasn't a cruel sound. It was almost sad. "And what chains do I carry, little queen?" Lily stepped forward, ignoring Alexander's whispered protests. "The chains of hatred, of vengeance, of unhealed pain. I see in your eyes the same darkness I saw in mine when I lost everything. But I also see that there is still light struggling to survive." The hall fell into deadly silence. The conqueror's generals expected him to kill her for such insolence. Instead, the warlord slowly rose. "You know nothing about me, woman." Lily didn't back down. "I know that someone who seeks to conquer 1,000 kingdoms is running from something, perhaps from himself. I know that violence is often the cry of a pain that finds no other words. And I know that even the hardest hearts can find redemption. The conqueror walked to her, his imposing figure making Alexander instinctively move his hand to his sword. But Lily raised her hand, asking for calm. The warlord stopped before her, so close she could see unshed tears in his eyes. My family was massacred when I was 7, he said, his voice now just a whisper. I saw my mother be... He couldn't continue. Lily, in a gesture that shocked all present, gently touched the conqueror's arm. I too lost my family to violence. I also knew the thirst for revenge. But I learned that creating more orphans won't bring our dead back. It only perpetuates the cycle of pain. The huge man trembled under her gentle touch. For 3 days, Lily remained in the camp, talking with the conqueror, who revealed his name was Magnus. He told her his complete story, how he had been a happy prince until war destroyed everything, how he had sworn that no one else would be weak as he had been, how each conquered kingdom was an attempt to fill the void within him. Alexander watched fascinated as his mother worked her peculiar magic, not with spells or potions, but with genuine compassion. She shared her own journey, how she had transformed pain into purpose, how love had healed wounds that seemed fatal. On the 3rd day, Magnus cried for the first time in decades, great sobs that shook his enormous body like a lost child. When Lily and Alexander departed, they carried with them a peace treaty. More than that, they carried Magnus's promise to use his army not to conquer, but to protect. He would become the guardian of the North, defending all allied kingdoms against external threats. It was a transformation no one could have predicted. The return to Wisteria was triumphant. Ethan ran to embrace his wife and son, tears flowing freely down his face. How did you manage it? He asked in wonder. Lily smiled, that smile that still made his heart race after all these years. I remembered what you once taught me. That love is the most powerful force in the universe. I just helped Magnus remember that too. The twins, now young women of 15, had prepared a surprise for their mother's return. They had organized a festival celebrating the strong women of the kingdom, with Lily as central inspiration. Artisans, healers, teachers all gathered to show that female strength had many faces. During the festival, Lily noticed a young woman watching everything from a distance, her face marked by poorly healed bruises. She approached discreetly and sat beside her. The young woman, startled to recognize the queen, tried to cover the bruises. You don't need to hide, Lily said gently. I've been where you are. Help is available. The young woman, whose name was Isabella, told her story between tears. An arranged marriage with a cruel man, daily violence, constant fear. Lily listened to every word, remembering her own moments of despair with Lorenzo. Before the day ended, Isabella was under royal protection, and her husband facing the kingdom's justice. This incident led Lily to establish refuges throughout the kingdom for women in situations of violence. Ethan supported her completely, decreeing stricter laws against aggressors and ensuring no woman was forced to remain in a dangerous situation. It was another silent revolution in the kingdom, changing lives one by one. Alexander, inspired by his mother's courage in confronting the conqueror, decided he wanted to travel the kingdom before assuming greater responsibilities. He wanted to know his people not as a prince, but as a man. Lily and Ethan, remembering how their own meeting had happened in similar circumstances, agreed, though with tightened hearts. For 6 months, Alexander traveled in disguise, working in fields, helping with harvests, listening to the people's stories. In a small village on the border, he met a young woman named Beatrice, a blacksmith's daughter, whose free spirit and sharp mind captivated him immediately. She had no idea he was the prince, treating him as an equal, challenging his ideas, making him laugh as he'd never laughed before. When Alexander finally returned, he brought with him not only experiences but also love. The presentation of Beatrice caused some stir in the court, another commoner, but Lily received the young woman with open arms, seeing in her the same fire that had attracted Ethan so many years ago. The cycle continued, love choosing its own paths. The twins also found their peculiar destinies. Elena became commander of the Royal Guard, the first woman in this position, leading with the same mixture of strength and justice as her father. Valentine chose the path of healing, establishing hospitals throughout the kingdom where poor and rich received the same treatment. It was during the celebration of their 20th year of reign that the unthinkable happened. Lily was in the gardens, picking flowers for the evening's banquet, when she felt a sharp pain in her chest. She fell to her knees, the world spinning around her. The guards ran to help her. Ethan was called urgently. The royal physicians worked tirelessly, but the diagnosis was grim. Lily's heart, which had endured so much, was failing. The news spread through the kingdom like wildfire. The people gathered outside the palace, praying, singing, waiting for a miracle. Ethan didn't leave Lily's side for a moment. He held her hand, told her about the children, about the kingdom they had built together, about the love that still burned as strongly as on the first day. Lily smiled weakly, her eyes still full of that sparkle that had captured the prince so many years ago. On a particularly difficult night, Lily asked to see each of her children individually. To Alexander, she said, "You will be a great king, my son. But always remember that the heaviest crown is the one that forgets the weight of others." To Elena, "Your strength is your kindness disguised as steel. Never let the world completely harden you." To Valentine, "Your compassionate heart is the kingdom's greatest treasure. Heal not just bodies, but souls." For Ethan, she saved her last words that night. "My love, you saved me that day in the marketplace, but not in the way you think. You saved me from a life without meaning. Each day by your side has been a gift I never thought I deserved. If I leave, don't mourn for too long. Live, love, continue what we started together." But Lily was stronger than anyone thought. Gradually, miraculously, she began to improve. The physicians couldn't explain it. Some said it was the power of the people's love. Others said it was Lily's own willpower. She preferred to think she simply still had work to do. Recovery was slow but steady. During this period, the kingdom showed its true nature. Nobles and commoners united in vigil, former enemies offering help, children making drawings to cheer the queen. Sophia, now Queen of Monterey alongside Marcus, came personally to care for Lily, a gesture that moved everyone. When Lily finally appeared on the royal balcony, weak but smiling, the roar of joy from the people could be heard in distant kingdoms. Ethan held her as if she might evaporate, tears flowing freely down his face. "You tried to leave me," he whispered. "Never," replied Lily. "I was just testing if you could rule without me. Clearly, you can't." The experience changed Lily. She became even more determined to leave a lasting legacy. She established universities open to all, regardless of origin or wealth. She created laws protecting workers' rights, ensuring no one would be exploited as she had been. Each reform was a seed planted for the future. Alexander married Beatrice in a ceremony that united simplicity and majesty. Lily saw in them the same love she had shared with Ethan, the same willingness to defy conventions for what was right. During the wedding dance, Ethan whispered in her ear, "They remind me of us." Lily smiled. Except they had a much easier beginning. The birth of Lily and Ethan's first grandchild was celebrated throughout the kingdom. A healthy boy with his grandmother's eyes and his grandfather's determined chin. When Lily held him for the first time, she felt the circle of life complete. This little one would carry forward all they had built, but in his own way. Years passed in relative peace. The kingdom prospered, alliances remained strong, and justice prevailed. Lily, now with silver hair, but still with the same indomitable spirit, became an almost legendary figure. Children learned about the slave who became queen, about how compassion could be more powerful than armies. On an autumn afternoon, Lily was teaching her grandson about medicinal plants in the garden when a messenger arrived with extraordinary news. Explorers had found survivors of Eastwood living in distant lands, preserving the traditions and culture of their people. Among them, incredibly, was a distant cousin of Lily's, someone she thought had died in the war. The reunion was emotional. The cousin, now an elderly man named Raphael, brought with him artifacts from Eastwood, including belongings of Lily's family that had been saved. Among them, a portrait of her parents, the only one that existed. Lily cried, seeing the faces she had kept only in memory for so many years. Raphael told how a group of Eastwood people had escaped to the mountains during the final attack, how they had built a new community, keeping their people's traditions alive. Lily immediately organized help for them, offering lands in Wisteria for those who wanted to come, or assistance for those who preferred to remain where they were. Many chose to come, creating an Eastwood neighborhood in the capital. The streets filled with the sounds and smells of Lily's childhood, the music of her people, the food her mother used to make. Ethan learned a few words in Eastwood to Lily's surprise and delight, his terrible accent making her laugh like a young girl in love. It was during this time that Magnus, the former conqueror, now guardian of the North, sent an urgent message. A real threat approached from the east. An empire beyond the mountains that had remained isolated for centuries now marched westward, its technology and numbers superior to anything they had faced. The War Council was convened. Kings and queens from all allied kingdoms came personally. The situation was grave. The Eastern Empire had weapons they had never seen, war machines that could destroy walls as if they were paper. The only hope was complete unity, something never before achieved. Lily proposed something radical. Instead of waiting for the attack or marching to war, why not try to understand what this empire wanted? Perhaps there was room for negotiation, for trade instead of conflict. Many found the idea naive, but Ethan supported his wife, as he always had. A delegation was formed, with Lily and Alexander leading, accompanied by representatives from each allied kingdom. The journey east took 2 months across treacherous terrain. When they finally reached the Eastern Empire's border, they were greeted by an impressive vision of cities with towers touching the clouds and roads smoother than any polished stone. The Emperor of the East was a woman, Empress Mailing, which surprised many in the delegation. She received them in a hall that seemed made of light and crystal. Her voice was soft, but carried absolute authority. So the Western kingdoms finally come to talk instead of preparing their swords. This shows wisdom. Lily stepped forward, making a respectful bow while maintaining her royal dignity. Your Imperial Majesty, we come in peace, seeking understanding. Our kingdoms have much to offer each other beyond conflict. The Empress studied Lily with keen eyes. They say you were a slave before becoming queen. How is such a transformation possible in the West? With calm eloquence, Lily told her story, but more importantly, the story of how the Western kingdoms had learned that strength came from diversity, that nobility was not in blood, but in actions. The Empress listened attentively, occasionally asking incisive questions. After days of negotiations, an agreement was reached. The Eastern Empire was not seeking conquest, but trade routes and exchange of knowledge. They had isolated themselves out of fear of being corrupted. But observing the transformation of the Western kingdoms under leadership like Lily's, they were ready for reconnection. The treaty signed was more than peace. It was the beginning of a new era. Eastern technologies would help improve life in the West, while the Western philosophy of equality and social justice would influence reforms in the East. Lily had once again transformed potential destruction into an opportunity for growth. The return home was celebrated with the greatest festival Westeria had ever seen. But for Lily, the most precious moment was sitting in her private garden with Ethan, their children and grandchildren around them, telling stories under the stars. Alexander had become the leader she always knew he would be. The twins had found their own brilliant paths. On a particularly clear night, Ethan took Lily's hand and led her to the highest tower of the palace, the same place where they had shared their first kiss as king and queen. "Look at what we've built," he said, gesturing to the lights of the city below, prosperous and peaceful. Lily squeezed his hand. "We didn't build it alone. Every person down there built this with us. We just showed them it was possible." As they watched their kingdom, Lily reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a slave fleeing in men's clothes to a queen respected in multiple kingdoms. Each scar, each tear, each moment of despair had been a step towards something greater. Not just for her, but for all who had been touched by her story. Ethan turned to her, his eyes still full of the same love he had shown when he saved her in the marketplace so many years ago. "Do you regret anything?" he asked softly. Lily thought for a moment, only not being able to do more. There's always someone suffering, always injustice to correct. But Ethan shook his head. "You've done more than anyone could expect. You've changed the world, Lily, not with armies or wealth, but with compassion and courage." That night, as they prepared for sleep, they found Alexander waiting for them. "Mother, father," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Beatrice is expecting our second child. But more than that, I want you to know that everything I am, I owe to you. Not just for giving me life, but for showing me how to live it with purpose." Tears flowed freely as the three embraced. It was one of those perfect moments that justified all the pain of the past. Lily knew her time was limited, her heart still fragile since her illness, but she felt no fear. She had lived more in her decades as queen than many lived in several lifetimes. The years continued, each bringing new challenges and triumphs. Lily saw her granddaughters grow strong and independent, saw reforms she had initiated take deep root, saw the kingdom she had helped shape become a beacon of hope in an often dark world. And then, on a spring morning when the roses Ethan had planted for her were in full bloom, Lily Valentine woke knowing her time had come, not with pain or fear, but with a sense of completeness. She called her family, each of them, for final words of love and wisdom. For Ethan, she saved the last. My love, my savior, my companion, promise me you'll continue to love, to lead, to live. Not for me, but for yourself and our people. Ethan, with tears streaming down his face, still noble despite his age, nodded. Until my last breath, I promise. But my heart will always be yours, in this world and the next. With a final smile, Lily closed her eyes, her hand still holding Ethan's. The entire kingdom entered mourning, but also celebration of a life that had transformed not just one kingdom, but the entire known world. Her story would be told for generations. The slave who became queen, the woman who proved that love and compassion could be the most powerful forces in the universe. Ethan lived 5 more years, ruling with the same wisdom Lily had taught him. When he finally left to join her, they say he died smiling, whispering her name. Alexander took the throne with Beatrice by his side, continuing his parents' legacy. The twins remained pillars of the kingdom, each in her own way honoring their mother's memory. And in the palace gardens, where Lily used to walk, the roses bloomed more beautifully each year, as if fed by the eternal love of a slave who became queen, of a woman who changed the world not with power, but with the invincible strength of a compassionate heart. Her love, as she always knew, was indeed sweeter than wine, stronger than death, a flame that not even all the waters of the world could extinguish. The end, dear friends. We hope the story of Lily and Ethan has echoed in your hearts. This epic saga reminds us that in a world ruled by bloodlines and prejudice, courage and true love are the most powerful forces. The love between a slave and a king not only united 2 hearts, but transformed an entire kingdom, proving that worth lies in character, not birth. May Lily and Ethan's journey inspire us to always face adversity with dignity and never allow origins to define destiny. What did the story of Lily and Ethan teach you about love and overcoming obstacles? Share in the comments below. Your insights might inspire our next video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to never miss another epic tale that warms your soul.